Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the starting late because of early voting, November 1st, 2022 school committee meeting. Call it to order. And first up, do we have any visitors here for open public comment? Seeing none, we shall move on to approval of minutes for September 20. Do any members, or really anybody, have questions, comments, or edits for the September 20 minutes?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from the September 20th, 2022 regular meeting as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Canfield, thank you, Ms. Raymond. All in favor?
I'm abstaining. I wasn't.
That's fine. 400 or 401. My apologies. No, I do the same thing as the Donnie. Excellent. These are some of my favorite minutes, by the way, Janet. Very robust meeting, that one. Next up, we have the minutes for October 4th, 2022. Do any members have comments, concerns, edits about the minutes for October 4th, 2022? Okay, seeing none.
Move to accept the October 4th minutes.
Second.
All right, all in favor? That's 500. The minutes are passed and shall be posted, as are the rest on our website, for those keeping score at home. Next up, teaching and learning highlight, yay! High School Musical, Little Shop of Horrors. With that, I'd welcome Miss Laura Canfield and any of her merry band to come forward. And just note, as you come up, folks, the mics are hot, and we'd love for you to use them, if only because it helps with folks listening on.
I'm not frequently told I need a mic, but that's okay.
For the recording purposes, I think, yes.
Don't worry, if I'm not.
Yes, it's hard. No, none of you actually need a mic to fill this room with your dulcet tones. But it's for the recording, folks. So, welcome, everybody.
Thank you. We're very happy to be here. It's amazing that another year has passed, and here we sit again. So I'm very happy to let all of you know that a week from Friday, we will be presenting Little Shop of Horrors at the high school. And we have a cast of 15. I think there are 15 of you in the cast. And we have representatives from different grades here. We have Logan Guild on my far right. Are you a junior now?
Sophomore.
Okay, good. Well, I'm always sophomore.
Ahead of your time.
And we have Charlie Bancroft, who is in
I'm in 8th grade.
8th grade. And go ahead, I should let you introduce yourself.
I'm Amanda McCabe and I'm a senior.
I'm Connor McNamara and I'm a junior.
Nice.
Yes, so we have a wide range of students participating in this, and I asked Charlie in particular to come because she and another young man are our middle school representatives. So the purpose being that we're hoping to create a bridge, a feeder system, if you will, between the middle and high school, so that when the time comes, this isn't brand new to the kids, it's just a transition. And I think that that's a piece that over the course of the years hasn't been as strong as it could be. So now it's nice that, it's actually, nice is probably not the right word, it's fantastic that we have musicals in all 3 levels of the school system in Foxborough, which is not a typical thing in a school system, at least not from my experience and knowledge. But it's quite a testament to our town and to all of you that there's the value in arts that we are doing musicals. That again, all three elementary schools. I know Scott Walker's doing the middle school, and I am filling in presently at the high school. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. We're just here to tell you that we're proud to be a part of a group that, and I'm going to let the kids speak a little for themselves if they want to, that is helping to fortify a program that in one way or another has existed for several years, but not really grown. And the desire here, certainly my desire and the desire, we have a regenerated and phenomenal booster club. There are 3 women in particular, Allison Bancroft, who is here, Carrie Lavery, and Sue Blanchard, who's also a teacher at the Adjourn, that have worked very hard and have raised, I want to say, close to $4,000 in fundraising in a few months to help to help get this off the ground. So it's outstanding. Yes, so we would love it if you all would come, and if you guys want to talk a little bit about your experience and about how the theater has impacted you, it's great. If not, go ahead, Amanda.
So I've been acting since I was a little kid. I think my first show was at the Borough, and Miss Campfield I know was helping out with that show. It was a little weird at first, I will have to say. I mean, we were doing shows that were for like little kids, like Main Street Kids Club, which isn't even like, I don't know, like a real like Broadway show. But I feel like over the years, like acting has been like the one consistent thing in my life, and it's something that I can go to every day and like I can feel comfortable in. And I'm continuing my acting career in college, and I just felt like this theater program and Miss Canfield have just helped me so much throughout the years.
And Amanda, who are you playing?
I'm playing Miss Mushnick.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Mushnick.
Miss, not
Everybody
Mr.
knows the show. We're going with Miss Mushnick, not Mr. Mushnick. So, yes. Yeah. Connor? Put me on the spot, Mrs. Canfield. Go right ahead. Yeah.
Always do.
Yep.
I've been doing shows since 6th grade with Mrs. Canfield. It's always a lot of pressure, but she always makes sure that I get everything done. Playing the dentist. It's a little bit of a scary role. I've got a few songs that I need to get down. But I hope it's going to be good. I do wrestling too, try to juggle them both. And it's fun, a little bit stressful, but it's fun. I do always enjoy it.
Great.
What else am I supposed to
That you don't have to say anything else at all.
Okay.
Logan, do you have anything you want to add?
No,
No,
it's
good.
all been said.
I actually do want to say that I'm grateful to the support at the high school. Principal Donovan has been outstanding. I know he has a lot of experience and appreciation of the arts, and music teacher, theater guy, and he's been incredibly extending to all of us to make sure that this works out well. The music department has been really good about sharing a space that has been historically theirs, and everyone's been really good, really generous about making sure that this goes well. So I'm grateful for that, and my hope is that this year springboards us into that this is no longer an exception, that this is the norm, that every year there should be. I grew up, I had high school musicals. I'm sure a lot of you did, Rich. You were talking about it earlier. That there's, these musicals are the stuff that memories and growth are made of. And I'm hoping, my hope is that, and I know Jim supports this, is that we will have this. This will be the first of many years to come, and that, the elementary school kids that may come to see this, although we did put an advisory in, because in case you don't know, the plant does consume people. There is an advisory, but it's fun, and it's a great show. So we hope everybody does come out, and that for years to come that we will do this. So we just want to let you know that it's next Friday. Please come support. We've already sold, I think, close to 70 tickets, which is actually pretty good. We're going to be, hopefully, by this time next week, still standing, right, guys? Yeah, so thank you. Anybody have any questions for us?
I was going to ask how rehearsals are going, because typically you kind of all wait to peak until the last week, and there's that crunch week, and then your voices go tired and everything. So how are rehearsals going?
We're definitely getting things together.
No, it wasn't meant to put you on the
Thoughtful.
spot.
No, she's thoughtful. That wasn't she's actually going to answer the question. That's good.
I can say that a lot of people are excited for the show,
Yeah.
and
You can't, or you can?
I can.
Oh, good. I thought there was a T on the end. I'm like, oh, really? Yeah. And I think you're doing a terrific job. Yeah. I think we have a lot of growth that's going to happen in the next week, as it always does. But all your points are valid and true. I would say no one has actually peaked yet. Quite safely, no one, not a single one. So, which is a good.
You're right on target.
Stay
That's
focused.
right on target.
Get the schoolwork done, get your rest so that you're all ready to peak. That's the key, because you need energy to survive next week. So you know what you got to do.
Amen. So thank you. So we will leave, there's flyers over on the table if anybody wants to take any flyers with them. And if there are any extra, if somebody on the board could bring some home tonight, that would be great. Yeah,
Absolutely.
good. All right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
the
for coming.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Best
Thank
wishes.
you. Break a leg.
Break legs
Work hard.
or other break things.
Sounds aggressive.
Oh, you actually have to do the exact phrase. All right, that's fine. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Next up, superintendent's update. Dr. Berdos.
All right, I will say, I did get to see the plant today.
Oh, how is it?
It's enormous, so I cannot wait to see it on stage. It's going to be impressive, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I meant to say it to Ms. Canfield and the kids too, but I'm delighted that they're doing that. That's great. Especially, you think about all the infrastructure that you have at the high school. It's nice, a really nice space to be able to put together production like that.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful.
It's looking forward to it. As far as updates, I have 3 or 4 here. One, our flu clinic that we had take place last month. We had a really good turnout. We're going to be hosting another one on November the 8th from 6:30 to 8:30, again in the IGO elementary school cafeteria. And then we'll also be looking about having another one past that. So it seems to be really convenient for folks to be able to come right to the IGO and be able to get their flu shots or vaccines or any of those things. So we'll be sending that information out, but again, November 8th. You may have seen, if you were at home on Channel 5, Mr. Aaron Bush, as far as he's one of the semifinalist for the Academy of Music Educator Award, so we're really excited. There are 2 in Massachusetts, actually. The other one is from Wellesley High School. And this is 25 from across the country, so it is quite an honor. And so we are very proud to have him selected as a semifinalist, so our fingers are crossed, and we'll see what happens with, again, that's the Recording Academy of Grammy Museum. And it's 25 of them across the country, so impressive.
When are they? Do they have a timeline for their final announcements?
You know what? I don't know what the timeline is off the top of my head. I can get back to you on that, but just a reminder, winter sports registration is taking place on Family ID. It's up on the sign out front of the high school, but again, sign up. If families have signed up in the past, it actually makes it quite easy to go in and just update. But just a reminder for winter sports registration. And then just some upcoming events. We have the Fall Jazz Festival coming up on Thursday. We have the BIT auction on Friday. Looking forward to attending that. And then, believe it or not, with today being November 1st, the end of the term is coming up for the middle school and high school for the first quarter. So that term is closing on the 10th. So that's pretty much it for updates this evening.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay. All right, well, seeing none, let's get to the main course. 2022 MCAS baseline and benchmarks report and review of results. Dr. Berdos or Dr. Burrows, whoever would like to introduce, go for it.
Turn it over to Dr. Burrows.
Okay, we have some guests of honor that are welcome to come up to the table.
Yay.
You want to come on up, and then you can all come up at the same time, sure.
Welcome, everybody.
Hi. Hi.
Hello.
We have it printed out.
If you want to just take a minute to introduce yourselves, who you are, and then I'll bore you with some big picture details, and then I'm going to hand it over to our leadership to talk through what the results look like in their grades and contents, and what action steps they already have in place this school year to help our kids.
Alyssa Macharnik, 912 Science Department Head.
Susan Carl, 912 Math Department Head.
Shannon Wazlewski, 912 English Department.
Hi, Noelle Hendrickson, K-8 Math Science Curriculum Director.
Karen McKinnon, ELA Social Studies Title I Curriculum Director.
Andy Servideo, Guidance Director at the high school.
Okay, so what we're about to present to you tonight is a couple of weeks worth of work digging into the data in their contents and grade levels, and then putting together, compiling a report. So what you have in your hands, you have two things. You do have a copy of our PowerPoint, and in addition to that, you have our baseline and benchmarks report. I added in a table of contents for you this year to help you out when when you're looking through that report. Our department heads are all going to be speaking to the root causes and action steps. That way you can quick reference what they're referring to when they get started. So as I said, I'm going to give a quick overview just so we know what we're talking about here. Our baseline and benchmarks report focuses on local, state, and national benchmarks. Our state and national benchmarks should be fairly familiar. That's our MCAS assessment, our PSATs, our SATs, and our AP exams. Those are once per year assessments. Our local assessments are all of the common unit assessments that we use at our grade levels. We also have diagnostics that we're using to be able to support kids, meet them where they are, figure out where those gaps are. So assessment is part of what we do throughout the school year. Those big state exams and national exams we use as benchmarks to see where we're at in comparison to the state and in comparison to the nation. I can tell you that we do very well in comparison to the state and in the nation. We're really proud of our data. In those local assessments, we really use them as an improvement tool. And what our department heads are going to speak to tonight is they're going to get into, they're going to get into the details of how we use assessments in our day-to-day routines as well. This slide, we actually had this slide last year, and I just wanted to point out a few things right before we get started. Even though last year was a full year in school, and I promise this will be the only slide that I mention this information, last year was a full year in school. However, we still had some heavy-duty health guidance and regulations that impacted attendance. And we also, our kids were still recovering. So we really are thinking about this data as establishing a new baseline for us. We're not looking at it in the typical way that we've looked at the baseline and benchmarks report in previous years. We used to talk about the 3-year average and look at our growth over time and then set new goals according to that 3-year average. When you look back at our 3-year average, we are literally talking about the entirety of the pandemic. So we're thinking of this as really reframing, establishing a new baseline, and thinking about where our kids are now. In addition to what you see there, I'd also like to point out that our 10th graders and our high school department heads are going to get into that data as well. Our 10th graders hadn't taken an MCAS exam since 7th grade. So this is really the last year that will be true. Our 10th graders coming into this year have taken the MCAS multiple years, and they last took it in 8th grade prior to their 10th grade, so it'll feel a little bit more normal. A couple of data points that are worth noting. We have a higher teacher retention rate than the state. We're above 90%. Our state's teacher retention rate is 86.8%. That's a really good thing. It means that we're keeping our staff. We've stayed above 90% even throughout the pandemic, when the national conversation has pointed to a fear over a teacher shortage. We've actually maintained our teachers. Our chronic absenteeism, I know that you may have, if you've listened to the news over the course of the past couple of months, heard about chronic absenteeism in the state being up. When you compare us to the state, we're much lower. So those are all good things. And then if you take a look at those bottom two rows, our SAT, PSAT, and AP scores, as well as our ELA and math average scores across grades 3 through 8, they're all higher than the state. So we've stayed strong. We've stayed higher through the state, despite the fact of despite those factors that impacted teaching and learning over the course of the past few years.
Dr. Burrows?
Sure.
On the teacher retention, do you have any numbers on its state level, district level retention? Is that due to people moving to other districts, or is that due to people leaving the profession?
I do not have those exact numbers for us. I could look into that. I'm not sure if that's something that we've recorded.
Okay.
I do know nationally they're paying attention to that when they are reporting out on teacher turnover rates. And I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I could let you know.
Okay. It's really just curiosity, because I'm seeing the same, the stuff that I read is saying the same thing, and we're seeing a very slight, but it is a downward trend right now. So it's just a matter of, is it because of the district, or is it because of people, like I said, leaving the profession? It's just curiosity. So thank you.
So if you have been paying attention to the news, you may have heard that chronic absenteeism was up 138% last year. Just a couple of points there. As a reminder, on the previous slide, you saw our chronic absenteeism rates were lower than the state. The reason why this is a talking point from the state is obvious when you take a look at the difference in scores. When our kids are in school, learning outcomes are better than for our kids that have interrupted learning and disrupted learning experiences. Sure. Yeah.
In regards to the chronic absenteeism, I know, during the pandemic and stuff like that, the normal process and procedure of starting CHINS cases when their, children are not coming to classes, has that started back up again? What's the intention and how to deal with that chronic absenteeism over time? Do we know that?
So,
go ahead.
No, you
okay. As far as when we're looking at the absenteeism, it has been related to medical reasons. Okay. And so we code that. And so when we think about the period of time that people have to be out with the 5 days, it goes back and we can see the medical excuse absences.
So that's what the larger amount.
That is the majority of hours. Yes.
Versus
hospitalization and, sorry, Michelle, you finished.
I was going to say versus children not coming to school for other reasons that have nothing to do with them being ill in any way.
No, majority of it's all been medically excused.
Okay. All right. That's good to hear, because I know that in other districts, that's not necessarily what they're seeing.
It doesn't mean that we don't have isolated cases.
Correct.
But for the majority, it has been medically excused.
Okay. That's good to hear. Not good that children are sick, but you understand what I'm saying. Okay.
And then just a follow-up on that, if you look, the next layer down of that is, what I heard you say is related to getting a COVID diagnosis, staying home 5 days, symptomatic or not, and all of that, versus a huge chunk of them being acute depression and things of that nature. I know, because we did talk in previous meetings that there was an uptick in that, but that's not what you're saying. That's
not the majority. No, you still and we've always had that. You do see a little bit of an uptick based on what we've been living through.
Yeah,
for sure. But as far as the majority, and then we're also seeing flu right now too.
Right.
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is just a more detailed look at our attendance data, and you do see that the average number of absences increased during that hybrid year and during last year where those mandatory quarantine periods were in place. You do see a slight uptick in the number of kids that were absent 10 or more days. We do anticipate, Dr. Bertos kept an excellent record of attendance last year. And we do anticipate that that will return to pre-pandemic numbers. And then chronic absenteeism, just to define that further, it's 10% or more, so 18 or more absences during the school year. So we see a slight uptick, but again, when you look at the number of students, it's a small number of students in comparison to the almost 2,500 students that we have here in Foxborough. So it is not a significant number of kids or a number that would be alarming or indicate a different issue.
Great.
Sorry, I have to go back. There we go. So this is just a summary of state data across the state. Math and science scores showed signs of recovery. ELA scores did not. ELA scores declined slightly. Part of that in our analysis can be attributed to the stamina that's required of our tests. Our ELA tests, we had 4 additional writing components to our ELA assessments when it switched from that half test being administered in the previous school year to a full test being administered this year. So that could be part of it. We're also seeing, in comparison to the state, we're seeing our lower grade levels, and we'll get into that in a couple of slides. But you see at the state level, there's an impact of lower writing scores, and there are early literacy challenges. We're seeing that our numbers in comparison to the state are significantly higher, and our data will show that in a couple of slides. So again, these are the state numbers. I'll switch over to our numbers fairly quickly, but essentially what the state is seeing, they're seeing a 20% loss in ELA scores across grades 3 through 8. And the state is seeing that there's a smaller dip in grades 6 through 8 than there is in 3 through 5. So that's where that language comes from when they're talking about early literacy being an area of concern across the state. They're looking at the comparison between the 3 to 5 MCAS results and the 6 through 8. So they're noting that in 3 through 5, they're still seeing that larger dip. When you take a look at our scores, we are in grades 3 through 5, double digits above the state in our performance. This is an assessment of students that are meeting or exceeding expectations. So our numbers are slightly better than the state. And then when you look vertically, you'll see that we are showing signs of recovery. If you take a look in our current, last year's 6th graders, they were in 3rd grade when they first took the assessment. There is a larger decline there. But when you shift toward the upper grades, last year's 8th graders, when they were in 5th grade, 47% were meeting or exceeding, and 45% were meeting or exceeding in 2022. So it's a much smaller dip in those later grades. So we're showing that sign of recovery in the later grades as well. Math is a slightly different story. The state has already seen significant gains in their math scores. Okay, and again, when you look at our math scores in comparison to the state, we're double digits above the state across the board. And then when you take a look at the earlier grades in comparison to the later grades, there's that same comparison again. Our students that were in 10th grade last year, as compared to when they were in 7th grade, we have a 4% increase. Our students that were in 8th grade last year in comparison to when they were in 5th grade, there's a 13% increase in the percentage of students that are meeting or exceeding expectations. So we're really proud of that growth, and really proud that despite the fact that this was during a challenging time, our kids have really shown recovery. And science scores, a little bit, there are still signs of gains. It's a little less dramatic than the gains in mathematics that we're seeing across the state. So when you take a look, our science scores, again, were double digits above the state in our 8th and our 10th grade. Those lower grades, in concert with the lower grades in mathematics as well as the lower grades in ELA, a little bit slower recovery in comparison to the upper grades. And again, when you take a look at last year's 8th graders when they were in 5th grade, we've almost completely recovered. Although it's a decrease in 1 percentage point. We're fairly close to where we were the previous year. It's almost insignificant. There we are. So just to frame this before I hand it off to our department heads, our graduation and attendance rates, we're proud of those. They remain high. They're consistently higher than the state. We're proud of our teacher retention rates. They're strong, consistently higher than the state as well. We are showing signs of recovery in the same places that the state has identified. However, I would say that our performance is impressively higher than the state. We're proud of that. And despite the fact of all that was going on throughout these last 3 years, we've really maintained a consistent and competitive PSAT, SAT, and AP scores nationally, as well as with the state. There are some opportunities for growth. We spoke about chronic absenteeism previously. We do anticipate that those numbers are going to return to quote unquote normal moving into this year, as we don't have those mandated health guidelines. And then also, there are some early literacy concerns across the state. We've fared better, but keep in mind that that MCAS data is coming before we even implemented the changes recommended out of the ELA curriculum review. Right. And that was, we've really been heavy on literacy resources, professional development for our teachers. So, we are ahead of the game when it comes to addressing that concern. Okay, enough about me. Let's turn it over to the department heads.
I'm first.
She's like, what?
So before we even look at the data on here, I just want to address for a minute, and I think I can speak for Noelle too, some of the things that our early literacy or early elementary teachers are being confronted with is classroom routines, classroom structures, and children knowing how to function in a school setting. And they're challenged with that since they've been home for COVID. Some of them haven't gone to preschool. They don't have as much school experience. And so before the elementary teachers can really tackle the content and the instruction, they're doing a lot around routines and classroom structures and all of that. So that's been definitely an added challenge on our early, K-2 educators. But we're starting to feel like they're getting a handle on that and understanding how to function as school-age children. So what we have up here on the slide is some information about English language arts and the screening. So we have started last year administering a universal screener for all kids in literacy grades K-4, and there's the picture of that is on the right side there. And it gives us some really good information about students learning, particularly in terms of reading. We give this to all students 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring, and it establishes baseline benchmarks and provides the teachers with really wonderful instructional plans to help support students who have specific areas of need. The students are categorized on this, as FastBridge is the name of the test, into several different areas, either an on-track, some risk, or high risk. So it assesses their potential risk for future reading challenges, and this really enables classroom teachers and specialists to support kids in varying areas. The other piece that we have in place for all now K-3 students, it was K-2 last year, was our foundations assessment, and this is a foundations tracker that you see on here. So this is an assessment, a common assessment that will assess the students, how they received the instruction in phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary and spelling. And so that tracker sheet really gives the teachers some insight into reteaching and small groups in order to help address gaps in student learning.
How, forgive me for,
okay.
How frequent is that?
The foundations?
Yeah.
It's after each unit. So every unit is different at each grade level. Kindergarten, their first unit goes for 12 weeks.
Okay.
Because it's a really, longer period of time because there's so much learning for the kids to do. It's usually 2 to 3 week units, sometimes 4 week units, and that's when an assessment is given. So that's how the foundations works for K. And like I said, we added third grade foundations this year to our instructional.
And for each of those units, you're getting
Data.
Data down to that level of.
Data down to that level, yes,
That's
yes.
really cool.
Yes, it's really helpful. On these trackers, this is the summary page, but it also gives the information on each unit so you can specifically see where the kids broke down, whether it was a specific skill that was taught in isolation, perhaps a trick word, or perhaps a dictation sentence, which would be when the kids are trying to put all the skills together in an entire sentence. So it really breaks down and gives a lot of really targeted information for teachers to help provide that remediation for kids that are struggling with the initial instruction.
And with the foundations, are those, do the teachers or you tailor that test depending where they are, or you're taking it as a standard
No,
test?
the foundations assessment is a standard assessment given to everyone, so that's common assessment based on your grade level standards, your grade level instruction.
Thank you, that's helpful.
And then in addition, we then have data meetings to reflect, and the classroom teachers work really closely with the special educators and the literacy specialists to provide that differentiated instruction based on the data that we have. So the next slide is going to be a snapshot of the MCAS, starting at grades 3. 2022, when you take a look at how we did, I'm pretty pleased with the how we did on MCAS. The third grade is always going to be presented with a bit of a challenge because it's their first time ever taking this kind of assessment. The kids prior to third grade do all of their writing paper and pencil. During the third grade year, we have them shift towards doing some more typing, but that's a different skill for kids. And just reading online, all of that is a little bit of a challenge. So third grade is always going to be presented with those challenges. But 60% of our students met or exceeded the expectations, which was much higher than the state, so we were really pleased with that. The fourth grade came up there next, and they also were above the state with more students exceeding. As you can see, the bars on the bottom, the blue bar being higher, and then the green and the yellow being flipped from the district to the state. So with the early literacy challenges that Dr. Burrows mentioned and that we discussed, I am really pleased with the systems and structures we have in place through the ELA curriculum review that I think over the next couple of years, we're definitely going to see those gaps being filled and those gains being made at the third and the fourth grade level. So I feel like we're in a really good place.
Can I ask, and this is for anybody because it's more of a contextual question when it comes to the way the MCAS is structured here, and I think it's helpful for people who maybe aren't as familiar with it, is when you're looking at something that's like partially meeting, can a student be slid into that category who is doing very well in a lot of categories and then just has a huge, like in one area, perhaps? Is that enough to move a kid to partially?
Yes, so it's all a point system, and so what we have seen historically since I arrived in the district is the writing scores being much lower. So you see the kids doing pretty well in the reading, and then the writing dips. And so that's, if you have 7 points on the table for a writing prompt, and you have kids who get 1 or 2 points, that's a lot of points. That's because the multiple choice is just worth 1 point. The writing is worth a lot. So I feel like we leave a lot of points on the table for writing that we could get back that would really help us maybe move from the partially meeting to the meeting. So when we look at the data at a more granular level against the individual students and the teachers, we look at that piece and how they did on the writing versus the rest of the assessment. And that's part of the reason why we brought in Empowering Writers as a district to really help.
Well, yeah. Hence, I'm hearing all the recommendations that you made to us last spring about your ELA next moves. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is a slide that I just wanted to show you because it talks about the growth, and this was our fourth grade, the entire district. But if you look at the vertical lines, that's the growth of the state being very high, between 80 to 100, high 60 to 80, moderate 40 to 60. But then if you notice, our growth was higher than that. So the state had 20, we had 26% of our kids have very high growth. The state, again, had 20 at high, we had 23% at very high. So the darker green is better. Across the district on ELA, I really saw very high growth numbers, and I attribute that to a couple of things. And one is something that you should all be commended with, is the fact that our kids were in school a lot of the time through the pandemic. There were some districts where kids were fully remote for a year, year and a half. We had the kids in Foxborough here all the time, at least part of the time. And so our growth, I think, is a little bit higher than we're seeing across the state. And then in conjunction with that, I think the teachers were really, really thoughtful about the kind of instruction they delivered when they had the kids in front of them, really focusing on the math and the ELA to make sure that those foundational skills were really there for kids. So I think those are two things that are important to point out, but I was particularly pleased with the growth here at the fourth grade level.
Thank you for the context.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about state, as I'm just going back on the slides? Does anyone know why the state average drops so precipitously? When you compare the 2019 to the 2022, it's pretty drastic. Like, you know, and I know it's not the same students, and I know you have to go this way, but the third grade state average was 56 in 2019, 56% at the meeting, and it's 44 in 2022. Like, all of those grades, 3 through 7, drop
I think a lot of it is the remote education. We know that teachers matter,
Yeah,
right? And
that's
so
what I
when the
would think.
kids are home and they're trying to go online and they don't have the supports or even the tools like that they have in the classroom, I think it presented a lot of challenges for kids that were fully remote. And I think that's part of the reason why our kids ended up with some good growth scores, because we had them in front of us.
But ours didn't drop as much as the state.
No.
So if you just
Yes.
compare third grade to third grade,
Right.
you know, ours didn't drop anywhere near. So when you look at it this way in this chart, it's really pretty drastic.
Right. I think she definitely said it,
Yeah.
is that our kids were one of the few in the state that were in school every day.
Yes,
And you can really see what a difference that made.
absolutely.
And specifically in elementary, I will say, in
Yeah.
math,
Yeah.
they didn't miss a unit assessment. They didn't miss anything because they were in school every single day. You can't say the same for our middle school, but our elementary kids, they got every single unit assessment that they're getting this year when we were in a pandemic. So I think that speaks really highly to, you know, having the model that we had. So that's incredible. So shifting gears into math, we are so proud of our common assessments that we use in math. We've worked and tweaked and made them as standards-based and rigorous as we possibly can, while not taking the joy out of teaching math at the same time. But we have K-4 unit assessments for every single unit that we teach. And we just got off of a round of data meetings, which was so much fun because we got to actually make that data actionable, which is the whole point, right? We assess kids so that we can instruct them. We don't assess them and say that's the end. And so we just came off of a nice round of data meetings to be able to do that. We are able to adjust practice and get down to the granular level of student need. I'm just showing you a couple pictures off of our Illuminate platform. If you were on that platform, you could hyperlink and run your mouse over there, click, and those students will populate that are in those performance bands that are dark green, that are light green, that might be in warning and red. We can see who they are. We can see them at the standards level. So we use these reports like crazy. We are so proud of our matrix reports as well, because we can look at question types and sort that way. And we just rely so heavily on our workshop model. That's where it's all. That's where all the action is. Our workshop model means that we can differentiate. We can pull kids into small group. We can give them what they need. They can play games. We have tools. We're so proud of that model that we fall back on to do all of this work. That's the most important piece, is that pedagogical model for us in Math Workshop. And I think it translated into the MCAS. So. You can also see in that picture too, sorry, our students in grade 3 and 4, they take every single math unit assessment online, just to mimic exactly what they're experiencing on the MCAS, so it's very normalized for them. And so for third grade is at the top, and fourth grade is the bottom one. We outperformed the state pretty significantly, especially in grade 4, which we were really happy about. But the shape of the graph in grade 3 as well, we exceeded the state. in both meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, and we did not have as many in the red, which is always a good thing too. And I just love this graph. This was a newer graph to me. I was clicking around and I found this one. The star is the mean student growth that the state had. The first opportunity that we can look at growth is grade 4, because it's the first time that they've grown, because they took it in 3rd grade. They can't grow if they haven't taken a test. So it's in 4th grade there is our first time to see some growth. And we love the growth reports because it's not only just that number. We're not assigning a number to students. We're showing how they grew in comparison to their peers in the state from one year to the next. So the state is that star. That was their mean SGP right there. And as you can see, it's at about the 42nd percentile. But if you look at our grade 4 growth in the green up there, the green bubble is our Foxborough growth. So we're far exceeded that. And that's always sort of our intention, is to get as high and right as we can. High growth, high achievement. So that was just a nice visual, I thought.
Before we move on to middle school,
Yeah.
and this is a question, if you're comfortable speaking to it as you go along, after you go back and get access to the questions and everything, because it's always after the fact, were the tests, did they change? If so, how much, or did it feel like a regular old MCAS? And I'm just curious through the levels, because just your thoughts on that.
For math in elementary especially, and I can speak to middle as well, but I think the math questions haven't changed that much. We sort of know what to expect. We know that it's not going to be the same exact question, but we know those constructed responses are multi-step. We know there's a part A, part B, part C, part D, and our best readers are also the ones who are going to do really well on tests like that, right? Some of the questions that are more typical with like A, B, C, D, multiple choice ones, I haven't seen a lot of change, just to be honest with you, in the last couple of years.
The reason I'm asking, because it's not, as we look at this for context, it's not like DESE decided to lop off a bunch of topics.
No, they really don't.
I just want to make sure we say that out loud.
It's the same for ELA. The test was basically the same. We know what to expect at this point.
Okay.
So it's just about preparing kids.
Oh, and in addition to the test formatting not really changing since we've gone computer-based, DESE also reports out ahead of time what percentage of the test is going to be attached to each domain category within a particular grade level. So we even have more information, like for instance, the high school geometry exam is 20%, grade 10 MCAS test is 20% geometry. So we can anticipate that, the breakdown across domain categories. We know exactly what that distribution will be. We know what standards they're going to emphasize based on that. So it's fairly predictable what is going to be on the test at this point.
And then you get to prepare them, give them the skills. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready for middle school?
Ready.
All right.
Okay, so here is ELA for middle school, which we administer the same FastBridge assessment, which is a universal screener, and it's administered to all kids 5 to 8, and it's the same thing that shows the risk levels: high risk, some risk, low risk, and then on track. So we're able to help determine kids that are in potential for future difficulties, and then use those same instructional plans to provide the kids some intervention. The literacy specialist at Adjourn, and then particularly the developmental reading teachers, have really leaned into the FastBridge plans to help fill some of those gaps that are that kids are coming up with. So it's been a good resource for us at this level as well. At middle school this year, we also have started to administer some common standards-based assessments. We have a new ELA program at 6 to 8 called Common Lit that, in conjunction with the writing piece, and as part of this, we have purchased their standards-based assessments. So we're delivering those 3 times a year. So we just did the very first one. And it's nice because the FastBridge is a skills-based assessment that kind of aligns the gaps and works to fill those. But this assessment is about the standards. And so you'll get a couple of different reports that will show if the kids are below or approaching a standard, or below or approaching at grade level, on grade level, or above grade level. So you'll see this this chart here is a lot of the below or approaching, because this is standards-based, this is the end of the year expectation, so it would be appropriate to see something like this in the beginning of the year, but we want to make sure in the middle of the year, we're, seeing some of that yellow turn to green, and then certainly at the end of the year. If you want to click once more. So then the other piece that's really nice is it provides us with a standard analysis. So then by standard, teachers can go in and really take a look at how the students are doing. So you can see the standard on the far right. We've got a lot of kids already in the green. That's not something that we need to focus on, that standard, as much as we do like the standards where you see more of the yellow and certainly the red and the orange. So this is going to be really helpful for our teachers at 5 to 8. And we'll do that 3 times a year and be able to really align to the standards. That's going to help with that rigor piece that we see on MCAS, and the Common Lit platform in general that 6 to 8 are using is definitely rigorous, and it's an online platform that kind of really provides that, kind of embedded MCAS kind of preparation, because the kids are doing the online reading and answering questions and writing. So I'm excited about the Common Lit feature, and having some time for our PLCs at middle school. We're spending a lot of time really looking at this data, looking at our new resources, and then being able to make some instructional decisions, adjust our practice, and do some small group work. So as far as MCAS, we have for the 5th grade here, first off, we tend to see historically for 5th grade with the change of school, a bit of a dip with 5th grade. It's been that way, for a long time. The transition to the middle school environment is it's a change for kids, and so we do see a bit of a dip there, but we're still above the state, which is something that we want to really celebrate. And then the same thing with 6th grade also being above the state, and our new programming, I think, is really going to help at the middle school level, because the horizontal alignment of the programs across the elementary school, where we have 3 elementary schools feeding into 1 middle school, there was always a lot of different, from the teacher perspective, they could say, oh, these kids were from Burrell, these kids were from IGO, just because of what they brought with them up to the middle school. And now with this horizontal alignment and then the vertical alignment, I think it's going to help us at the 5th and 6th grade level as well. 7th grade MCAS, we have a really high number of kids exceeding expectations, which is nice to see for the 7th grade, and then our 8th grade above the benchmark as well. As I said, Common Lit is something that's going to really help my 7th and 8th grade teachers really get a handle on that rigor that's expected for MCAS, a lot of reading of multiple passages and doing a lot of analysis and thinking that is required. And then this is the same growth distribution graph that I wanted to show you from 4th grade, and this is 7th grade. And you can see we had some very, very high growth amongst our 7th grade students, with that 33% at very high growth, 25 at high growth. So that was a good celebration for our middle school teachers as well. And overall, I think we're in a really good place as far as ELA goes, with the new programs and new structures that we have in place. We've given the teachers a lot of professional development. It's a lot for them to absorb. We had a trainer in today working with our kindergarten and 1st grade teachers on our new writing program. And so I'm very hopeful in the next few years we're going to start to see some of these shifts in ELA, but it's going to take some time because there's a lot for our teachers to absorb. But I feel like in the last couple of weeks, they're starting to kind of settle in with it and start to feel comfort level. But it's a change for them as well as for the kids. But I'm excited.
There's a question. Back at the kind of the the non-MCAS.
The Common Lit, the
common
standards-based.
And then the Fast Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Where does writing live within those?
Where does who?
The writing. Live within those, yeah.
So in the MCAS, it's obviously on MCAS, but it's not in our formal assessments, and so that's why we have the Empowering Writers program that's really going to help us tackle that writing piece. The big thing about writing, especially at the elementary school, is the difference between genre and what it means to write a narrative or story and what it means to write informationally. So we've got to separate those two things out and teach the kids that.
Right.
So programmatically, that will help, and we do have writing benchmark assessments that we're administering at grades 2 to 8 to help, again, monitor that. We're just doing twice a year with those within a genre because it just feels like a lot of assessment. So just prior to teaching narrative, they'll do an assessment, and then post, they'll do an assessment. And look at the gains. So it's in there, but it wasn't in the slides. Thank you
No,
for
that's,
bringing that up.
you're doing it. Thanks.
All right, so for math at the middle school, similar to the elementary school, we have common unit assessments for every single one of our math units. The report on the right is from Illuminate. That's a 7th grade year. So if you look at those assessments, you would be able to hyperlink on those and take a look at the data. Obviously, we're brand new still. It's just November 1st. So at the time that I screenshotted that, there was just the beginning one. But we're able to sort of see all of those, track students all the way from K all the way up to 8 in Illuminate, so we can go all the way back and see how they're doing. And I showed you a different report on the left-hand side also that you can hover over and select students based on standards. So we use a lot of these reports in PLC meetings when we're sort of diving into that data, seeing what do we do next, right? Foxborough, we have a lot of good math data, a lot of data at our fingertips, but we're always saying, okay, now how can we make that actionable? And like Karen said, we do data meetings, we do PLCs in order to adjust our practice, but also still focusing heavy on the workshop model, making sure our middle schoolers, which I think really sets us apart from other middle schools in the state and in the country, is that we focus on a workshop model of instruction. It's not stand and deliver. Kids have been doing workshops since kindergarten. They know exactly what they mean, what it looks like when to be in small group, to be in workshop, all of that stuff. So you can see that translate all the way up through 8th grade. And so for the MCAS, as Karen mentioned, we typically take a small dip in 5th grade in terms of just achievement. Only, it's mostly been attributed to, again, coming from the 3 elementary schools into the middle school. We're still above the state, especially in the meeting expectations, which looks really nice. And then you go to 6th grade, the shape of that data versus the state as well, well above the state in our meeting expectations, which is really nice, and the red bar being lower. And 7th grade, again, the shape of that graph looked nice for us compared to the state. And what was nice was our 8th graders did sort of the best, I guess you can say. I feel like we're positioning them really well for the high school. They did a really nice job compared to the state if you look at the shape of that graph as well. And just to kind of highlight that is the next slide. Again, it's the same as I was showing you with 4th grade, the mean student growth for the state at about the 36th percentile. And our 8th graders are leaving us with an average student growth at 69%, which is absolutely tremendous. We're really, really proud of them. So lots to be proud of.
What do you attribute the high rate of growth to? I mean, you just got done
So,
talking about it. Yeah.
but the way that growth works is that they're compared to the same students that got that score in 7th grade in the whole state. So I see that as attributing to solid academic programming, consistency, really good teaching. I feel like we're getting them ready for high school. That shows, and it shows in that. So yeah, I think I think our model is huge in math.
I think, may I add just another piece here
Please.
too? I think that
Please.
what you've heard them say a lot already this evening is going back to the standards. And that's MCAS will take care of itself if we're teaching the standards all along.
Yes.
And so all of our common assessments that we have, they're all standards-based. Teachers are focusing very much on what is the standard, what should students know and be able to do. That's really the most important piece.
Yeah.
And so again, MCAS is going to take care of itself when we're focusing on the grade level standards and where they should be. And I think that really says a lot about our teachers and about our curriculum directors doing that work and our administrators as they're looking at that data at the student level and disaggregating that all the way down to the standard level. That really, we need to make sure that that's a highlight here.
Yeah, I agree with that. And a lot of times when we're talking to teachers, if we're talking about 8th grade MCAS data, I'll say that's the K to 8 MCAS. Because it really, if the kindergarten teachers didn't do their job, that data is not going to look like that. The 3rd grade MCAS is really the K to 3 MCAS because it builds upon everything they've learned since kindergarten. And so I want to try to include those especially our K to 2 educators, those early numeracy skills that there's no way our 8th grade scores would look like that if they didn't have such strong, solid beginning. So it's really a K to 8 assessment by the time it gets to 8th grade, Brent. And so I feel like to see that is really not just about our 8th grade instruction.
Right.
It's about K to 8. So
I love that you stated that. That's not said enough. And
it's
wonderful.
And when we do as an aside, when we talk to our faculty, when we go to faculty meetings at the elementary school, that's how we refer to that test. And we make those kindergarten teachers solve those problems and say, what were you responsible for that one? They're like, oh my gosh, I see so much of, what I needed to do in that third grade question.
That's great.
So, we want to include everybody because really it's everybody. Shifting gears into science, just as a sort of general reminder, 5th grade is assessed on 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade standards.
Yeah.
And 8th grade is assessed on 6th, 7th, and 8th grade standards. Those 5th graders that took that assessment did not have a ton of science in 3rd and 4th grade because of the pandemic. We were here every day. We were so happy we were here every day, but we were really ELA and math heavy. So some of what we saw in terms of maybe not quite the growth and recovery that we had wanted is attributed a lot to the pandemic and also it being 3 years of standards assessed in 1 year. But we did exceed the state in 5th grade in the shape of that graph and as well in 8th grade. We are in a science curriculum review here, so I'll be back with hopefully some great recommendations to sort of reignite us in science. I think we can do some really great things in elementary that we haven't been able to do because of where we were with the pandemic. So I'm excited to be back with some great recommendations, hopefully that you will that you'll like.
For context,
Yeah.
when it comes to the 5 and 8 science MCAS, do you have a sense of how much of that is content, just factual-based things versus skills?
Yeah. So they've gotten away a little bit from maybe it being just a rote vocabulary word and defining it, and more about like a context, or they'll have, a plant cycle, and kids will have to really analyze what's happening there. And again, it could be from 2 years ago that they last sort of like heard or thought about this.
Right.
A lot of it is a reading comprehension test.
Yes.
Can I read something? Can I understand a diagram? And can I problem solve and figure it out? It's not as much textbook, like if I read this article and then I'm going to be asked a question based off what I just read. It's a lot of, I hate to say common sense, but there is a lot of that involved as well. But it's a very different type of assessment, I would say, than what we're talking about with math.
Well, and I think Noel and I have been working together a lot to try and infuse some of the science and social studies instruction into the ELA block, because so much of these assessments are reading science and social studies based content and then
Reading
answering
tests first and
questions.
foremost.
So
Yeah.
we've worked to create some units that we're dropping into the ELA block to help kids with this kind of connection between the content areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just before we move on to the high school, I just want to commend Noelle and Karen for the amount of work that they put into not just this presentation, but the grade level meetings, the data meetings, what you don't see behind the scenes. They're meeting with every grade level. They're digging into the test. They're talking about what went well, where do we need to improve. They're really committed to unpacking this with teachers. They live those standards. With those curriculum standards with our teachers, and they do such a nice job helping teachers wrap their brains around what those outcomes were and how it relates to what we're doing in the next unit, what we're doing this year, and how can we consistently improve. So what you don't see, that work behind the scenes, I feel like they've been talking about the MCAS since August with grades K to 8, all of the grades, K to 8, they've been really digging in and doing such a nice job helping teachers understand the data. So thank you very much for the work that you do and for the time that you put into this.
Thank you.
So we are going to shift gears over to the high school. And just as a reminder, we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that the 10th grade test, that 10th grade MCAS test, those students, last year's 10th graders, hadn't taken an MCAS test since 7th grade. So that's a larger gap than we normally see, and the data shows that as well, I think.
Okay, so as we've mentioned, you can see the effects of the pandemic and hybrid learning in our ELA scores. I was encouraged, however, to see that these scores really echo our findings from our curriculum review last year in terms of literacy. As Karen noted, we've taken steps to improve screening and assessment and instruction at both the elementary and middle schools, and we should start to see some of those effects come up to the high school in the next couple of years. So overall, we are, actually, still the last one.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We're just about level with the state scores. Now we can go to the next one.
Okay.
When the English department met last month, we broke down the scores and did an item analysis of all of the questions, and we noticed that our reading and language scores are at or above state scores, and it's our writing scores that are just below the state level. So that actually matches our focus over the last few years as we've been meeting the challenges of COVID, with limited class time, or limited in-class time, I should say. Our writing instruction really focused on longer and more relevant writing assignments, research and argument papers, ones that really developed critical and analytical thinking skills, which you can actually see reflected in the reading and language skills up there. So we definitely focused less on those shorter, on-demand, immediate writing assignments in the past few years, and that's what they do on the MCAS. So despite the return to a more normal year this year, the state does anticipate that it will take about 3 to 5 years for scores to recover. As Karen said earlier, we plan to continue our focus on writing instruction in the elementary and middle schools, and we expect to see some improvement over the coming years as those programs take flight and those kids come up to us. And then as we see changes in our student progress and growth, we plan to review and make changes as necessary.
Okay. So as you can see, we outpaced the state in exceeding and meeting expectations by almost 20%. We're very proud of the work put in by the teachers and students to fill in the gaps created by time lost due to the pandemic. Although we were pleased with the results compared to the state, we have some work to do to get us back to those pre-pandemic levels. Currently, we are working on problem solving, perseverance, and stamina with students. You've heard a lot about the stamina of the test across all the grades. So this year as a department, we are engaged in a year-long book study using the book Building Thinking in Mathematics. We're really hopeful that implementing these practices will initiate some changes and help improve some of those skills that we think will really help improve the scores overall. Okay, so stay on that side. So looking a little deeper into the data, the students did especially well compared to the state in the standards about functions. This is really good news, as it means that most students had a solid foundation as they entered into Algebra 2 this year. So they were very prepared going into their junior year. The standards that really showed the most need for improvement were typically in the geometry strand. This was not surprising to us, since as the state was trying to tell schools what to do given limited time, geometry was often considered a non-essential standard. But with a 4-year math requirement, students will continue to work on improving all the skills before they actually graduate. So they do have some time to get some of those filled in before they leave us. So overall, we were pleased. I think pleasantly surprised with how well our students did. And same as everybody else is saying, really a lot of kudos to both students and teachers for all the work that they've put in over the past 3 years to try to keep students on track or to rebuild some of the skills that were lost during those days when they weren't in a building.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Both English and math mentioned the length of the exam.
Yeah.
In the benchmarks report. Wow. What do you do? If it's a problem identified, what do we do? I mean, it's tricky, isn't it?
It's tricky. The length of the exam and the stamina, I mean, if you're in the building on those days when students are sitting in rooms for, 2 days in a row, 3 hours at a time, that is a lot compared to what they're normally used to. And I think we saw really some large impacts of that last year, coming back from the pandemic and what school had looked like for those students. So I think at this point, like I said, we're all working on that stamina issue. Longer tests, longer projects, more independent work that's lengthier to try to help build some of that.
Yeah, focusing on sitting down and actually writing an assignment right in front of you instead of having a week to do something is really helping to kind of build that stamina back in. But yeah, it's very apparent.
Yeah, and I was just thinking from a practical standpoint, what do you do, right?
Right.
You just don't change your schedule to,
Right.
let's just go do a 2.5-2 hour block of testing,
So, the book that we're looking at really looks at sort of the idea of perseverance with problem solving. Because students, while they were home, they either had somebody at home that they asked, or they Googled something right away, or looked with friends. So we've been actually looking at some non-curricular tasks where they could get up and work as a team, trying to solve that, and really kind of pulling back how much information we're giving them, how much immediate help we're giving them, to try to give them that productive struggle to really help with that perseverance.
Oh, really well said. That's great. That's really good. That's really quite interesting.
Thanks.
That's
great.
I love that.
Yeah,
Because that's
that's
also
really good.
looking, that's falls under what you were saying earlier, Dr. Barros, of letting MCAS take care of itself.
Right.
Right.
We build those skills.
Right.
It's, you're creating good students.
Yeah,
So.
that's the goal.
I want to go back to English language arts. It took me a minute to formulate this, so I apologize for, I'm loving all this, but I want to go back for a second. So we've seen a little dip. What is your target for meeting and exceeding? We know historically, particularly in composition, students leaving high school going on to post-high school education, every university in the world has a composition support program. It's a struggle for every high school student as they move on to the next, if they're going to pursue post-high school education, right? What is your target? We are at 61, in 10th grade 2019, 61% either met or exceeded, 64 in 2021, 58 in 2022. Should we be in the low 60s? Is that our goal, or is it realistic to try to be higher?
I think it's realistic to be higher. I think we have to really rethink the way that we teach writing instruction, or the way that we teach writing. I think giving a purpose and a context for writing, rather than we are writing an essay today, everyone write your 5-paragraph essay, but actually having the context for writing. We do a lot of that with our inquiry base and our PBL, is all of our writing has an authentic audience, it has an authentic context, it has a reason for existing. And I think focusing more on the reason why we're writing, not just that we are writing, helps build those skills that I think will get those numbers up.
Okay,
And
thank
I
you.
think the work that's happening in K-8 and this horizontal and vertical alignment is really going to help the middle school out too, because just having consistent writing and that consistent structure. The program that we adopted is all about pedagogy and having teachers understand the process of writing and what real writers do, a lot of book analysis of looking at what real authors have done, and then trying to talk that in the younger grades and then start writing it in the later middle school, or elementary into middle school. So I feel really good about the writing that's going to be started. It's already starting to take place, but it's, I think, going to help out the high school.
So excited.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's really helpful for context, for you guys to have pointed out that, like, taking a test for 2-3 hours, it takes endurance, it takes building up to that. And I think a lot of us have, realized that our endurance for things after the pandemic, through the pandemic, has been challenged, let's put it that way. And I hadn't really thought about it in the same context of that students need to get used to sitting in one place and concentrating on something and working on it for hours at a time. That's not something that they've really had during this time frame. And so I think it's really helpful to realize that attributed to some of this and that we're working on it, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Okay. So I think your question earlier about how the tests may have changed or stayed the same may have been tailored to me. So the science
deliberately, but
standards technically changed in 2016. However, the state had told us, don't change anything, hold on, for the 10th grade MCAS in science, which we actually give to 9th graders, but that's, in a minute. And we piloted the new test in 2019. It was an opportunity, we got no scores back, but at least we got to see it, see what the kids were going to see, kind of thing. And it was intended that then they would implement the computer-based test in 2020, and we know what happened there. And then they gave the paper-based test again in 21. And they had planned a 3-year phase-in, and instead we got 2022. Congratulations, here you go. It's the full implementation of the next-gen test. But overall, things did go well. We're very skewed to the left, as we've seen in a lot of the graphs tonight. And I think that we can say that as terrible as COVID was, there were certain aspects of it that we could take advantage of. We were really clear on what the absolute essentials as far as the content standards were and making sure that we got to those. And we didn't have much choice but to do computer-based assessment.
No.
And so we created a lot of computer-based assessments for those 9th grade biology students, and they continue to be used in the classroom, which at least gives the students some opportunity to practice something like what the MCAS will look like.
Okay.
You look like you have a question.
I always do.
Don't.
The anticipation.
Okay.
Resting face.
So,
Yeah, my resting question
Resting
face.
question face.
Next slide, next slide, next slide.
with that in mind, they did give us 1 year of grace in that they scaled the test on the next-gen scale, which we saw on the previous slide, and then they scaled it on the old legacy scale, and so that we could, keep things interesting. And they did the competency determination based on your score on the legacy scale. And so with 2% that did not meet the competency determination, that is, it's double where we were 3 years ago, but it's still not a whole lot of students, and we have a plan to solve the problem.
How many humans is that?
That is 4 humans.
That's not, okay, yeah, okay. And they'll take it when?
Their next opportunity will be early February.
Fine. Yeah, okay. And then for context, are you all, it's all biology?
It's all biology,
Okay.
unless we have a strange move-in that was in physics or,
Sure.
in May.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah, and so the other thing to think about is when we did the item analysis, when we looked at things, there used to be 7 categories for the biology exam. They've now squeezed it down to 4. And if you look at it, molecules to organisms is most of the content on or the largest part of the content on the test. And it's the first thing we teach in the year. And it's the place where we're least ahead of the state. So recency versus primacy, like the things we teach at the end of the year, they do better on when we take a test in June.
Shocker.
It's not exactly a shock. The other thing, you were asking about the changes in the test towards the practices.
Yeah.
And technically, 50% of the questions address the practices. 100% of the questions address content area in the 9th and 10th grade test. And it's, maybe it's 48, I'm not sure. But it's roughly half the questions address the practices. And those are, some of them are the multiple choice and the multiple select questions, but a lot of them are the open response where they have to read a longer passage. They have to interpret a diagram or a graph or a table. There are multiple questions on the same subject, which comes back to the test stamina issue.
Right.
But it's also part of why we are pushing so hard to get students to practice just general graph interpretation skills, general table interpretation skills throughout the year.
Excellent.
That's what I got.
And then in aiding you in that effort, are there other departments that can buddy up with you in showing them more data and graphs?
I hear a rumor that they do data things in the math department.
How about in social studies? Is that a crossover possibility?
It's a crossover possibility, and I know that they do use more tables and graphs in social studies than they do probably anywhere other than science. But the other place where we're buddying up is that we have, I think it's 3 of our teachers participating in the Building Thinking Classrooms book study, because those ideas can be applied even in non-mathematics classrooms.
How are you feeling with, I guess, how are you feeling in terms of the department's kind of comfort and readiness with the new testing regime and interpreting that, given that the state was hurry up, wait, hurry up, wait, hurry up, wait?
Everybody's a little freaked out, and to suggest otherwise would be silly.
Good. Okay.
But it came very much to a practice push, practice push, practice push. What are the standards? What are the standards? Keep going back to it. And hold your breath, cross your fingers. And it looks like we selected correctly based on the very limited information that we had. There's still, I believe the original pilot questions that were released were 22 questions that we had to use as the basis for what would the entire test look like. And now we have a new 42 that came out because we've got the released items from last year. But there's a very limited selection of questions to look at to even model classroom instruction and classroom assessment after.
Okay. Keep on keeping on.
The 22 to 42, huh?
No, I mean, because that's when Dr. Burrows was saying, well, we know, we're going to get roughly this many questions on this many questions on this. That doesn't seem to be your,
Well, we know how
your
much,
world yet.
we know how much stand in the different content areas it will be.
Sure.
But knowing the exact content areas for 1 year of biology, when yes, it does throw back to what did they learn in 7th grade? What did they learn in 8th grade? But the specific standards are taught for the first and only time in 9th grade.
Yeah.
So it's rough, but that's okay, because we're making it work.
The data, it's working out. The data's, so I appreciate all the context. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Well, can I just say, before we get to the PSAT and the other stuff too, if there's anyone awake still watching, I think they should listen to what's happening about vertical articulation and across the board. And when we were talking about elementary and middle school, about literacy, how everyone was nodding their heads right down the table about how that's all critical.
Yeah.
So if there is a takeaway in all that we do, I appreciate we're not just looking at numbers, so that's very important, because I started to get into numbers and I just kind of walked away from it, right? Well said, that it's about what we do each and every day. So I just hope people pay attention to that. And that all the curricular stuff we talk about and all the stuff we're putting in and all putting behind this is what makes a big deal. And it's not always shining out in numbers, but it's shining out in comprehensive approach to what we do. So I think that's a takeaway that I hope the public understands and hears.
I think the last meeting and this meeting, if you are an invested member of this community, these have been two so far, and looking forward to the rest. The information that you guys have shared with us last meeting and this meeting give you such a solid understanding of what is happening, where we are, where we're trying to get to, that I would encourage everybody here to get 2 friends to watch it, get them to get 2 friends to watch the tape, and so on and so on and so on, because there's just a lot of really rich information, not just data, about what is happening and the progress that we're making.
Well, you just identified a great exponential growth question that we can do tomorrow in math class. And I would just echo and add to this that I think the common theme that you hear from our high school department heads as well is they, again, have been looking at this data since August. They're already putting things into action. They have a book study. We've started the science curriculum review. We're talking about where do we need to improve. We're really focused on meaningful writing and really focused on writing in our ELA classes in the moment, as Dr. Wazalewski had named. So, we're not just looking at numbers. We're being really thoughtful about where we need to pivot and what we need to really think deeply about as educators and as department leaders. to really continue to improve instruction. We have an excellent group of curriculum and instructional leaders here. It's been a pleasure putting this report together with them. They really know their stuff.
Just wanted to speak to what Rich had said about if anyone's, still watching and following along and kind of how this all comes to light. I did bring my daughter's, she's in 10th grade, I brought her MCAS results. And as I'm listening to you speak, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing, it really breaks it down to the questions. I'm hearing you talk about data, but then I'm looking at the results and understand, it's all coming together. So, you know what I mean? It's not just percentages, it's students. I have my daughter's test, and what you're saying is speaking to these results, and it's all fitting together. It's all, flowing together. So this is just, I don't know, it makes me feel just like it's so purposeful, you know what I mean? Because I'm just a parent trying to figure it out like everyone else, and you guys are here doing all this work behind the scenes that a lot of people don't commonly know, and it's so helpful. So thank you for everything.
Makes me very proud of you all.
So Andy, bring us home.
Community.
Yeah. Wow. So
No
we're going to
pressure.
fall off the cliff, Andy.
All right, so PSATs, SATs, ACTs, I'm going to talk about all those three to kind of start. Similar to MCAS in the sense that there are some areas where there could be a few little gaps along the way, but also some consistent instruction, which is keeping our scores kind of steady. I think the biggest difference between these tests and MCAS is these tests are not required. Students don't have to take the SATs, they don't have to take the ACTs, they don't have to take the PSATs. We offer the PSATs to all juniors. So every junior, it's a Wednesday in October. We pretty much shut down the history wing, and they all take it free of charge. We think it's really important to make sure that students, even if they're like, I don't really want to take the SATs, I don't know what I want to do, that they're exposed to the test, they understand that it is important. It is something that we as a community, we as a school value. So we kind of mirror the same conditions. It's 20-ish students per class, and they take their exam. When we look at the 2020 results versus the 21, so the different breakdowns, it's mean, evidence-based, reading and writing, and then math. So in 2020, we were just a little bit below the state average, whereas in 21, we were above the state average. And we went down a little bit. We went from our mean of 1073 to 1024, but the state average dropped from 1085 to 996. So it's a pretty significant drop, and we obviously we're going to have a little bit of a hit. I think that's the thing, we've all established that everybody, no matter where you are, kind of took a hit. I think we in Foxborough did a good job absorbing the hit and kind of being able to kind of push through. So I'm excited to kind of see where we're at for 2022. They just took the exam on October 12th, so we'll get those results in around December. So we'll have a pretty good idea of what our current juniors are going to have for their scores. But when we think of the juniors who took it last year, their freshman year was the year that we went out in the spring, and then their sophomore year was hybrid learning. So there were a lot of opportunities that we generally would put into practice at the high school from the guidance world that we weren't able to do. Like group guidance was just very different. It was through Zoom, video, Teams, it just was not the same. So now that I'm back in guidance, where we're working, the department and I, we've talked about let's kind of strip down the group guidance curriculum, bare bones of what we need, and let's kind of target where these kids need certain interventions. So we're going to start putting some things in place as we go forward. And one of them is going to be in second semester talking with sophomores about the PSATs and getting into classes and explaining what it means so they actually have an idea of a test. And not just like, oh, here's this test that I've kind of heard of and then take it. So that's kind of the targeted approach there. And when we jump to what the SAT averages look like, which is kind of, PSATs, that's what it is. It's a practice. Sometimes students try, sometimes they don't, but ultimately want to be exposed to the test. Whereas the SATs, that's the one that counts. So when we look at where we were for 2020, 21, and 22, look at our mean evidence-based reading and writing and our math scores. So in 21, our mean went up slightly, and then last year kind of dropped down a little bit. But again, a lot of this has to do with who these students are and what their path was through high school going through the pandemic. So we do know that there was going to be a little bit of a hit in some places, but it was encouraging to see that even though things kind of went up and down a little bit, that it hasn't been completely off. We're still kind of in the same approximate range. I think year to year, there's always going to be a little bit of a higher or lower percentage, but we're still pretty close. And I think the next slide will show our 3-year averages. So it's during the pandemic from Foxborough High School, our state average and our national average. And you can see that the mean scores for Foxborough High School were the highest. Our evidence-based reading and writing was just a little bit below the state, and our math was the highest out of the 3. And we were fine against the national average everywhere. So I do think we're doing great work here, and really it's just a matter of, like we've said, the stamina of the test, and a lot of colleges are now test optional. The majority actually are test optional, so a lot of students aren't taking the tests. So you take the students who wouldn't even take the test anyway. So like, I'm not going to college, I don't need SATs, ACTs, okay? And now you have a lower percentage taking them because a lot of colleges are like, you don't need to take the test. So our numbers are going to look different as that new kind of normal comes with what the colleges are requiring for SATs and ACTs. So when we jump to ACTs, I actually think that this is kind of fascinating. So I'm not going to go through all the different categories. They have more categories than the SATs, but we look at 21 and we're pretty good. Like, we have pretty high scores that year. And you're thinking, like, how is that possible during that year? But I think it really comes down to the amount of students who took the ACTs is lower than in general, and it's lower than students who took the SATs. So we have a smaller percentage of students who, generally the students, I looked at the list who actually took them, and the students who took the ACTs in 21, the majority of them apply to competitive colleges that were still requiring a test or encouraging a test. So those students were taking both the SAT and the ACTs. So there was a lot of really high achieving students who said, you know what, I'm going to try to do what I can. I'll take both if I can have the option, and that's why I think we have a little bit of a spike. And when we look at here, we look at the Foxborough High School state and national averages for the past couple of years. I think one thing that's important to note is even though we're a little bit below the state average, Massachusetts has the highest ACT average in the country. Right. So we're pretty much right where we need to be. Our Foxborough High School's average is higher than the majority of state averages. Yeah. So we've done a really good job. Again, like the national average, you can see that they've kind of taken a hit compared to where we have been, and even the state. We're doing really well across the board. We always kind of tell students kind of the average score is around a 20-ish, give or take, and we've exceeded that everywhere. So if our students were consistently getting around 26s, 25s, we'd be in pretty decent shape.
What's what's the end? Like, what kind of numbers are we talking about for roughly for students who are actually taking the ACT versus the SAT?
So
PSAT, I get,
yeah.
And I like the way you guys do it. It's great.
So the SATs, we would say probably we have about, give or take, maybe like 100 students will take it.
Okay.
We probably have a little bit lower now. In 21 for ACTs, we had 14.
Okay.
So it's pretty low.
Pretty low.
We actually had the ACTs a couple weeks ago at the high school, and we had 3 Foxborough students register.
Okay.
So generally speaking, our ACT numbers are lower than SATs anyway. They just typically are. But when we're talking about a dozen-ish, that's a pretty low percentage. It doesn't really fully reflect the entire graduating class.
Right.
But I will say that I'm happy that the students who are taking the test are holding their own in there.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, and those are kids who are looking nationally, right?
Right.
For their search. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Are they doing the ACT because they have to, or because it's just a second option?
So it's like the second option. We've always encouraged students, and again, it's been a weird couple of years, but we've encouraged students to say, okay, take the SATs, take the ACTs, do one of each, whichever one you do better on, take that one a second time.
Right.
And and ultimately, we've had some students say, like, well, I'm not taking any of them. It's test optional. Why am I going to go take a 4-hour test if I don't need to? I'm not going to do it. And then you have those students who are going to these really competitive colleges or applying to really competitive colleges who say, I'm going to need both. I need everything I can possibly get. They've been taking honors courses, AP courses, they've been working their tail off for 3-4 years, and now they're saying, if I have to take one test and that could be the make it or break it, they're gonna do it.
And so are really competitive colleges still holding the line?
No.
So you're saying that some colleges are falling off from requiring it,
So
right?
a lot of them are not, like most colleges are not requiring them, but some colleges will say, hey, if you send me your score, it's optional. So send me your score, and if you have a high score, we're gonna count it for you, and if it's a low score, we're gonna count it against you. So if I'm a student, I'm like, I didn't do great, or I'm not gonna do great, I'm not gonna even take them because I know that's not gonna help me. Whereas if I'm a high achieving student, I'm like, all right, I have a pretty good shot, I'm gonna do pretty well here, and I'm gonna take that, send that score, and have a better chance to get into that college.
Yeah, and aren't some schools using it for aid as well?
Yep.
For merit?
Or
So
scholarships.
for
Yep.
scholarships? They might not use it to get in, but they might use it for that. And also some areas, I think especially the math areas for engineering and stuff like that, they may use it for placement for classes. So there are some reasons why students still should be considering taking it.
Right.
So we'll jump to APs. So when we look at, the graphic makes it look like 21 had a ton more students. It was like, what, 14, 12 students, something like that. It's like, it's not that many more. Just the way the graph came out. But we went from 194 to 206 down to 192. But when you look at, I looked at the enrollment of juniors and seniors, because that's typically who would be taking the AP courses during the year. Sometimes we have a couple sophomores, but pretty much it's juniors and seniors. And I looked at kind of the percentage of how many students we had in the building who were juniors and seniors for those years, and the overall percentage of how many students we had who were eligible versus how many students took the test were pretty close. It was like 89%, 91%, whatever. It was really, really close to year, just based on the ebb and flow of the enrollment. So even though the numbers have changed a little bit, the percentage is still pretty relative.
Sure.
Same thing, we look at the number of tests administered. So 2020, we had a lot. We dropped a little bit in 21, and we've dropped more in 22. So this is something that I kind of want to keep an eye on, just to say, okay, I'm okay with a little bit of a drop. That's not the end of the world, especially with our population, our enrollment kind of changing a little bit. But going from 454 down to 417 is something to kind of keep an eye on. If we bounce back this year and we're back into the 430s or so, I'm going to be less concerned. But if we keep trending downwards, then it's okay, what's going on? What can we do to kind of have students get back onto taking more tests? But I think a lot of times what will happen is we'll have students who previous years, it's like, I'm going to take 3 AP courses, I'm going to take 4 AP courses. Now the students saying, I'm going to take 1 AP course, I'm going to take 2 AP courses. There's still a lot of students taking the tests and taking the courses, but they're just taking less of them. Each individual student is taking maybe less APs.
Yeah, okay. They're not quadrupling
Right,
up on APs
right.
in a given term.
Right.
And what's the relationship between kids who take the AP class versus take the exam? As a reminder for us.
Yeah, so everyone who takes the AP class is required to take the AP exam.
Okay.
And so that drop is not necessarily because of a specific course or anything?
Right.
You think it's more of an overall? Just
Yeah.
students taking less?
Yeah, I mean, that's just my theory on it. I think it's really just with what the students have been going through. They're like, you know what, I still want to take APs. It's still important to me, but I'm not going to take 4 or 5. I'll take.
Well, a lot of us were counseling that under the banner of self-care and not, running yourself into the ground.
Balance.
Thanks, Rob.
And even now, like I have
Exactly.
students this year who are like, oh, it's my 5th AP. And I'm like, that's a lot. I mean, but
a lot.
everyone's different. I'm never really one to say you can't do it, you shouldn't do it. It's just, here's the information. You are a different person than me. I would not be able to do that. But you may be able to do it. Here's what it is. You need to make that right decision. And some students do awesome and others struggle through. But I mean, I think the end results are all pretty significant for us.
So you're still looking at an average of a student is taking 2, a little bit over 2, somewhere between 2 and 2.5 per student. And I realize that there are some that do 5 and
some that do none.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that per student per year or per student overall?
Well, so if I'm just doing the quick math, so you had 194 students in 2020 and 454 test administrators, so that's 2 point whatever, if you have to take the.
In the given year.
Right,
not
and I
over-
realize there are some
Yeah.
courses that it's a 2-year and all those kind of things, but it's just the quick.
Yeah, yeah.
From 192 to 417 is almost 2. So.
And the next two graphs are pretty much the same information, just different ways. So we're talking about from 20 to 21 to 22, the number of students who scored a 3 or better, and then it's the percentage of students who scored a 3 or better. So when we look at 21, we had a lower number of students and a lower percentage of students, but we also had the highest number of students taking them. So there's that kind of trade-off. We always kind of say, like, we encourage students to push themselves and push the boundaries. And I've always been in the camp where if I had a student who I knew was not going to get a 5, you know, we're meeting for course selection, and like, you're not going to get a 5, like straight up, like, I know you're not going to get a 5, but it's worth it for you to be in this course. And if a student gets a 2 in a course, as a counselor, I'm okay with that because the experiences that they're getting and the learning that they're getting, and it's that I think is more of a value than the overall end result of the score. We just want students to be able to learn in a high environment. You know, we want them to. It's high pressure, high stakes, but that's what life is. So we want them to be exposed to that.
I'm grateful that you do that because it is about the course and we let the test can take care of itself because I think it's still good for kids. Also for context here with the APs, were the exams or some of them scaled back in 2020 because they lost course time?
They had it like
going in March, like coming home in March, whatever.
It was like home, right? They do it at home.
Some of them had home exams. Some of them had parts of their exams canceled.
That's what I thought.
Some of the content, like I can speak to the AP statistics class that
Yes.
year, there was a whole unit that they said that's not going to be on the exam. So the length of the exam was still the same, but some content was removed.
It's good because I'm just cautioning myself and others not to read too much into when you compare 2020 to 21 on that.
Right, and then in 2021, they didn't do that.
Right.
Correct.
And then, but there's still, most of us, there was some hybrid and so forth in that. So did all classes be able to complete all the content that was needed for some of the?
For 21?
I mean, I would say probably no. I mean,
Right.
we started 2 weeks later. We start later than other schools anyway. Some schools are going back in early August and they're all taking the exam the same day. And then in that 2021 year, we started 2 weeks later. So, and it was hybrid. So there were a lot of factors why the
And
pace.
some of the exams were computer-based for the first time.
For the first time.
So that also affected some of, I think, the scores, for better or for worse, in some cases.
A lot of challenges went into that.
There's actually one thing I just want to mention about the SATs that I forgot to mention earlier. So one of the things we're going to do this year in the department is we're going to work with our Kristen DeRico, who is our social studies department head. We're going to go into some history classes, junior classes, December, January, depends when the PSAT results come out. And we're going to have more of a small group conversation about it. In the past couple of years, it's been like a auditorium full of juniors explaining the results and like, I don't know, there's some students who are getting some things out of it, but there's a lot of students who are just they're not even paying attention. So this way we can sit, go over scores, have the students have their scores out, interpret it with them, explain what their PSAT scores mean versus what their SAT scores could look like. We're gonna have them actually link their College Board account and their Khan Academy account together. And that will target their interventions of where they need some support. And it has like almost a little pie graph. So for me, I could go in, it's like, okay, this standard, I have one pie graph. Okay, I need to really work on it. Whereas like Karen could have that same standard and have 4, and she's like, I don't need to work on that. I can work on whatever I need. So we think it's really important for students to spend the time to understand their own scores and understand what the tests mean. We're still encouraging students to take the SATs. We don't know what the future is going to hold. We don't know if college is going to say we're cool being test optional forever, or you know what, now that we're kind of getting back to a little bit of a different place, let's make scores count again. So we just want to make sure that students understand what their scores mean and how to prepare for the SAT. And then we'll go over the junior timeline and what they need to do so we can kind of really help them understand where they are in their place in high school and what steps are coming their way without freaking out senior year to like, today's November 1st.
Right.
The anxiety in the students the past few days has been pretty high with applying, but it's,
I'm looking at the committee members and people who have had their children go through this. And I'm like, oh, it's coming. Yeah.
You think they may go backwards from the optional to more requirements?
So I've talked with Bruce Hamilton, our college counselor, and he has his pulse on all this stuff, and he said that just through the conversations he's had with some of his colleagues in other places, and just conversations with college representatives, that even the state college system, like let's take a look, let's see if it's worth it. So some might not. It's just hard to tell. So we'll see. They might go through these couple of years and say there's really less of a value to have them, like let's scrap it. Or they might say, listen, this is actually making it tougher not having these test scores, so we need another
layer,
another piece of criteria.
Okay.
Gotta keep going in the right direction. That's my opinion, I'm sorry. It's only my opinion.
I just wanted to just mention one more time, Mr. Servideo mentioned that Khan Academy allows you to link. Khan Academy now has a partnership with the College Board. They offer free PSAT and SAT preparation courses, and now it's so in sync with a student's performance that they can actually drill down and focus on exactly what they need to improve. There are practice tests embedded in Khan Academy, so there are free opportunities for kids to practice the PSAT and the SAT and really get them prepared for the test, so it's not an unknown.
Or for middle-aged people who want to see how they would do now to go and actually do it.
You might be surprised.
Okay there.
Not saying I have a lot of free time, but
We should all do it at the end of this meeting.
I'm saying I might have actually done that, but.
Is Mr. Servideo going to proctor it too?
And Mr. Servideo, thank you so much, and lovely to have you in guidance as well. I love hearing your report, so thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you're enjoying it again. So.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Not your first rodeo, but
yeah.
Awesome. Anything else? Oh.
And just closing out, I know we've spoken about this intermittently throughout the presentation tonight, but all that you hear our department heads and our curriculum directors speaking about they all tie to the plan for success. Mm-hmm. So we already have in place the practices and the focal areas that we need to have in place to continue to improve. We're doing really, really great work, and if you look back at our plan for success, all of the work that we're doing with MTSS, inclusive practices, co-teaching, that expansion of our skill set there, that's all intended to help individual kids with exactly what they need help with during the regular school day. And we're doing a really great job building teacher capacity to do that. And our curriculum and instructional leaders are very committed to improving instruction and using that data to improve instruction. So we're proud of our work. We're really well aligned with our plan for success. And this is a great crew.
Dream team.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's been fun putting this presentation together. I actually enjoyed it. I've smiled a few times about about this.
I would just say again, the last two meetings will give anybody in this community an excellent, solid, informational understanding of where we are, where we're trying to get to. So please, if anybody is paying attention to this, Mr. Peterson, if you're going to write this in the Reporter of the Sun Chronicle, please watch the recordings of these two meetings. So thank you all very, very much.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to watch you get excited. I think I say that every time, to watch you get excited, but it's really a pleasure to know the impact that you are having on the future of our community and just students in whole. So thank you.
No,
I also want to say thank you also for the last slide, because thank you for connecting the dots. We know it, and you know it, but it's important to do that for folks because, yeah, this is what we're here about. So I really, really appreciate how thorough you all are. I also find a perverse joy in having a bunch of questions and having 85% of them all answered before I open my mouth, which is amazing and better for you all as well. So thank you for being so thorough, truly. Any other comments?
I would just say I think it's great that, the kids take the MCAS exams. We all know and hear the complaints about doing it, but that there is useful information that comes from it, and that to see it all kind of come together and see how we as a school system utilize that information is really important. It helps kind of tie, when we're talking about, writing an essay, not just to write the essay, like there was a reason why these tests were taken, and we can argue back and forth about how maybe they were set up, but at least we're getting some useful information from it, and that's good to see. And thank you for taking the time to explain it to the rest of us.
You're here.
We appreciate it.
I just have one more thing that I wanted to mention. If you've noticed in the news over the course of the past couple of weeks, the National Assessment of Education Progress, the nation's report card, has come out. And I just wanted to point out that Massachusetts leads the nation in fourth and eighth grade math and reading scores. We teeter between first and second place. So Massachusetts is leading the nation. And when we compare Foxborough Public Schools to Massachusetts, we're above the state. So this is a really great place to be. We have great educators. They're doing great work. And our students are achieving. It may not have seemed that way over the course of the past couple of years. The past couple of years were hard, but Foxborough has done an excellent job really maintaining high standards for teaching and learning and helping our kids meet those standards. So we should be really proud of where we are.
Absolutely.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Is that a thing? That's nice. Next up, acceptance of a donation from the Foxborough Touchdown Club. Who would like to speak to it?
So I'm sure you know that we're very fortunate to have a number of boosters organizations that support not only the sports, but music and so on. The Touchdown Club is one of those, and basically what they're doing is through a $2,000 donation, helping to sponsor additional coaching capabilities to the freshman side of the football program. We see that in the baseball. Boosters do the same type of thing. So it's a very, very nice, gesture. I think it helps the kids have a little bit more support when they're out there, and with appreciation. Obviously, it's a $2,000 donation. So,
thank you very much for the context.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept with gratitude the donation of $2,000 from the Foxborough Touchdown Club.
I'd like to second that.
All in favor? 500. Donation is accepted with much ongoing gratitude. Thank you for your work, everybody. Other matters. Ms. LaDonna, do you have anything?
Yes, we had a wonderful, successful Halloween parade at the Parks and Recreation in Foxborough at the outside the Aggo School on Saturday. We had some record attendance and wonderful families. Everyone had a great time. We had our wonderful National Honor Society students there, and when I went to sign off on someone's slip, there was a person with her, and I said, well, do you have your slip? And he said, no, I'm just here to help. And not even an NHS student, just a wonderful Foxborough student that just came to roll up his sleeves and pitch in with no ulterior motive. It was really nice. It was a nice testament to the students and the people that we have here in town. So it was a sweet story. I just wanted to share real quick. We have some holiday events coming up. I don't have the dates in front of me right now, but everything's available on the website. Everything's posted, so we're going along. That's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Canfield.
No, just reminder once again, November 8th, the flu clinic at the IGO, 6:30 to 8:30, if I got that right.
Yes. For my part, just want to say thank you for everybody in Foxborough Music Association and the high school music department to put together the Strings and Voices concert, because it was a lot of coordination between professional guests, having our friends from Attleboro, North Attleboro, thank you so much. There, it just sounded great. It took a lot to put that event together, and it really showed. So,
It's great to see.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's nice. We're hosting people. It's great. Mr. Pearson.
I was just going to mention that the sports are starting up this week. The tournaments are all starting. So field hockey is a 5 seed in Division 3. Volleyball is a 14 seed in Division 3. And football is a 6 seed in Division 4. And what that actually means is those are all home games for all 3 of those teams because they're higher in the brackets.
Awesome.
So they'll be playing their first games sometime in the next 3 or 4 days. Soccer is not seeded yet, so soccer we won't know until probably tomorrow. But had some good showings in those tournaments.
That's great. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Raymond?
Nothing else to add?
Okay. Dr. Bertos?
Just looking forward. I know Richard and Sarah will be at the school committee conference this week, and so we'll be attending many. They've got a lot of really good sessions, so looking forward to that, and bring back any information that we can.
And thank you all for attending. That's great. Dr. Burrows?
I have nothing.
Mr. Euclid?
Just a quick update on the security, things that we've been delayed on, doors, replacements and stuff. If you've been into the high school, you've seen the new secondary door concept that's pretty much completed. Just waiting for some fob connections, the electronic side of that to be completed. New doors on the gym exterior, new doors on the weight room area. We're about to do the last 2 big ones on the outside, so the high school will be in pretty good shape from a newly secured point of view. And Borough School is nearly wrapped up. We're down to just the last few items at this point, finally. Kind of still struggling, but I hope by the end of December that the last big items will be completed.
And as soon as that's done, then we'll get news on the
Either a phone call or an email.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you all so much. With that, I'll take a motion.
I'd
Anybody?
like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor? 500. We stand in adjournment. Thank you.